Good morning everyone, today we're going to be talking about what is the best subclass to use because so many people have been asking me, Carol, I play XYZ class, what subclass should I be using? But before we jump into all of that, if you're new to the channel, I upload NGS content daily, so if you do play this game, I would really appreciate a subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin the video. So before I can tell you what the best subclass is, you need to know what each subclass actually does, because there are 10 different classes, and when you play it as a main class versus a subclass, there are specific skills that carry over and things that don't work. A great example is Hunter skill's Iron Will. Iron Will is a very powerful ability because whenever you take an incapacitating attack, it will leave you with 1 HP and a moment of invulnerability when this skill is triggered, and Iron Will basically gives you a second life every 3 minutes. So whenever you take any hits that's supposed to kill you, well, you survive on 1 HP and you get this 10-second invulnerability window where you're invincible. It's a very powerful ability, and so a lot of people might think, oh, Hunter subclass is going to be the way to go because you get this Iron Will. Well, unfortunately that is not the case because as you can see on the asterisk over here, can only be used as main class. So this means if you use the Hunter as your subclass, you do not get this ability. Even if you have a point in this, you won't be able to activate Iron Will as a Hunter subclass. Alright, so with that explanation out of the way, what exactly carries over for the Hunter as a subclass? The first ability is Flash Guard over here, reduces damage taken. This one's fairly simple. If you are a main class, you take 25% less damage. If you're using it as a subclass, you take 15% less damage, and this is just active all the time. It's a very nice ability to have, but it's just 15% damage reduction. However, for the average player, 15% damage reduction isn't that big of a deal. It's not really significant enough to say that, oh, you need to run Hunter subclass if you want to be tanky. But this is where Hunter's physique comes in. As you can see over here, you get 50% damage reduction when it is activated. However, it only lasts for 30 seconds and there is a 3-minute cooldown on Hunter's physique. And on top of that, there are more points over here which you can activate. For example, Hunter Physique Extra Shield, which gives you 3 shields which will allow you to be immune to crowd control abilities 3 times. This is incredibly powerful, especially when there are attacks that stun you or knock you down. Well, whenever you activate your Hunter Physique, you get immunity to CC as well, which is a very big deal. And on top of that, we also have the Hunter's Physique Short Cycle, which shortens the effect of Hunter's Physique. However, it also drastically reduces the cooldown. So these are the main abilities that carry over when you play as a Hunter subclass. Your passive ability is going to be 15% damage reduction. However, your active ability is going to give you 50% damage reduction as well as immunity to crowd control abilities. And this is one of the main reasons why people like to run Hunter, because it just gives you that tankiness on demand. If you're about to die and you see, oh, there's a big attack coming in, activate Hunter's Physique, boom, 50% damage reduction. On top of that, you have this 15% damage reduction that's on all the time, and you can live through most attacks fairly easily. But now let's move over to the Fighter class. The Fighter class has 2 abilities over here that are used as subclasses. The first one is Defeat Advantage. As you can see, increases damage against downed enemies. This is a really big deal because whenever you down an enemy, that is usually when you do your biggest burst abilities, such as your Photon Blast, Brave Combat Finisher. All of your big hitting abilities are used when you down an enemy or when you break an enemy. So by having 10 points in Defeat Advantage over here, it simply increases your overall damage by 5% whenever you down an enemy. As a subclass, it's a big deal. And then on top of that, we also have Defeat PP Recovery. It's increased PP recovery when attacking a downed enemy. So this is when you use your normal attacks against a downed enemy, you recover PP a lot faster. As you can see, you actually recover 40% more PP, which is actually quite a big deal. Next up is the Ranger, and the Ranger has Bad Condition Ward as well as Bad Condition Reduction. Bad Condition Ward is fairly simple, makes you more resistance to status ailments, and it increases your resistance to ailments by 50%. Now the next one is Bad Condition Reduction. This reduces the duration that it lasts. So a very good reason why you might want to run Ranger subclass is when you are running Lucille Exploration, when there are those really bad days where it's like the enemy can confuse you. Then it might be a very good idea to run Ranger subclass because first of all, 50% less chance of being confused. That's a very big deal. And if you do get confused, the duration is reduced by 60%, so you're not confused for as long. So this is the main perks of the Ranger class, just against status ailments. The The next subclass we need to talk about is the Gunner. The Gunner has attack PP recovery as well as Overwhelm. So Overwhelm is fairly simple, increases PP recovery when attacking enemies other than bosses. So this is great for PSE bursting or just for content where there's not a lot of bosses and you're just killing regular enemies. Then Overwhelm is really nice because it allows you to recover your photon power a lot faster. It actually increases it by 25%, which is really cool. And then on top of that, we have attack PP recovery, where it just increases your PP recovery when you're attacking normally by 30%, which is also really nice. Personally, I don't really see that much of a need to run Gunner subclass. The main reason is because it just provides more photon power overall, but let's say that you are PSE bursting or you're doing content where you're constantly killing a lot of small mobs, then sure, running Gunner subclass is definitely viable. Next up, we have to talk about the Force subclass. This is one of my personal favorites. The reason is because of Eradication PP gain over here. You only need to invest 1 point into this and recovers your PP when nearby enemies are defeated or downed, and it recovers 5% of your maximum photon power every time you defeat an enemy. This is incredibly useful, especially in PSE bursts, because you're simply constantly spamming photon arts and everything around you dies, and you just constantly get your photon power back, because usually in PSE bursting, you're killing multiple enemies at once. You're not just killing 1 or 2, you're killing like 4 or 5, and so you regenerate your photon power incredibly quickly, and this is why I really value Eradication PP gain, and I really like having Force as a subclass. However, on top of Eradication PP gain, we also have PP recovery boost. You can get up to 15 points over here, and if you invest 15 points into PP recovery boost, it actually increases your natural PP recovery by 60%. This is really big. This is when your photon power just naturally regens when you're just standing around, when you're running around, when you're not attacking an enemy. This will increase that regeneration by 60% as a subclass. It's a very big deal. Next up, we have to talk about the Techter. They have Weak Element Amplifier as well as Awake Ale over here. So Awake Ale over here actually increases your Photon Blast gauge accumulation when a boss enemy is nearby. You don't even need to attack the boss. If a boss is nearby, it just automatically allows your Photon Blast gauge to charge up faster. And it actually increased the charge rate by 20% as a subclass, which is pretty awesome, especially if you like to use Photon Blast as often as possible. But do keep in mind that your Photon Blast does have an inbuilt cooldown, so even though you charge it up really fast, if it's fully charged, if the cooldown is not over yet, you won't be able to use your Photon Blast again. And on top of that, with Weak Element Amplifier over here is increases Photon Blast accumulation when an attack's element matches the enemy's elemental weakness. So let's say that you're running Darkfall Solus or Darkfall Aegis that is weak to the light element, and you're using an elemental weapon such as the Neo J weapon, or you're just using light techniques, then you can definitely take advantage of the Weak Element Amplifier as well as the Awake Ale over here in order to charge up your Photon Blast incredibly quickly. However, do keep in mind you are going to be sort of time gated by the cooldown of your Photon Blast. But nevertheless, by running Techter subclass, it will allow you to Photon Blast more often than usual. Next up is the Braver subclass. The Braver subclass is unique in the sense that it has 4 abilities instead of the usual 2. The first one is Mighty Guard over here, reduces the damage taken and PP consumption when you guard with a weapon action. Now do keep in mind that your class needs to be able to actually block when you hold down a weapon action to take advantage of Mighty Guard. If your class can't do that, well, Mighty Guard just doesn't do anything for you. However, Breakfall HP gain does apply to all classes, and this one is incredibly useful in my personal opinion. You recover 10% of your maximum HP when you press spacebar or the jump key whenever you get knocked over, and it's just really nice to be able to just heal yourself 10% of your maximum HP every time you get knocked over. And on top of that, we also have Rest Assign PP gain, which means whenever you heal yourself with a Rest Assign, you actually recover 30 photon power as well, so this is super nice. And then on top of that, we also have Resta Effect Amplifier. Now, if you max this out, it actually heals you 20% more than what the regular Rest Assign is supposed to heal you, so you get some overheal, which is pretty nice. Next up is the Bouncer subclass, and they have 2 main abilities here which are very powerful. The first one is Defeat Amplifier, and the second one is Particle Destroy Advantage. So Particle Destroy Advantage increases the damage that you deal and reduces the damage that you take according to the number of enemy parts destroyed on a single enemy. This is incredibly useful against a lot of boss enemies, Darkfall Solus for example, because you break a lot of parts in Darkfall Solus. You break his arms, you break the back part. So by using a Bouncer subclass, you actually increase your attack by 1% every single piece that you break. So the more pieces you break on the boss, the more damage you deal, and the less damage that you take. For every piece you break, you take 2% less damage as well. However, there is a cap of 3 parts, which is why on Darkfall Solus, a lot of people run Bouncer, because you always break the back piece and then you always break the 2 arms. So you're always going to get the maximum amount of buffs over here, which is a 3% damage increase, as well as 6% less damage taken. However, the second ability, Defeat Amplifier, increases the down factor applied to your enemies. So this allows you to down the enemy a lot quicker. So that is either when you physical down or you elemental down the boss. And as you can see over here, when you invest 15 points into this ability, there is a 15% increase in your physical down factor as well as your elemental down factors. So basically 15% more likely to break the boss a lot quicker. So this is really nice to have, and a lot of people will run Bouncer, especially if you're speed running or you're trying to min-max the most damage possible because of these 2 abilities right here. Next up is the Waker subclass. The Waker subclass is another one of my favorites because of how much utility it offers. The first ability is Lucky Sign. It's simply 20% chance of not consuming any rest assigns or reverse assigns whenever you use it, which is really nice, especially against a lot of those longer boss fights, because you usually run out of potions, and once you run out of those healing items, you tend to die a lot more often. So having Lucky Sign is incredibly useful. On top of that, there is Rest Effect Continuance. So this is whenever you use a rest assign to heal yourself, you get some residual healing on top of that. However, there is a downside to this ability. As you can see here, when using Rest Assign, the amount of HP you recover is reduced, but you gain sustained HP recovery for a set time. So the effect duration is 10 seconds, and it reduces the heal potency by 50%. However, it gives you 4% HP sustained recovery rate. So basically, instead of healing all of your health all in one go, it heals it slowly over time, over 10 seconds. Now, personally, I prefer this simply because I have no fear of overhealing myself. Sometimes you only take like 25% of your HP's damage, and you're like, should I really use a rest assign because I'm gonna be overhealing? But with the Rest Effect Continuance over here, I don't care. I'm just gonna heal anyway, because I know for the next 10 seconds, if I take any extra damage, it's just gonna heal over that. So this is why I put a lot of value in this. However, I know some people might not like this simply because it reduces the amount of healing a rest assign is supposed to heal. So it's really give or take, and it's really up to your personal playstyle if you want this ability or not. The next ability is Welfare Management. This ability is super clutch in my personal opinion. Basically, whenever your HP goes below 50%, you get 30% damage reduction, which is a really big deal. And then on top of that, any healing that you receive is increased by 10% as well. So this is super nice to have, especially in a lot of boss fights, Darkfall Ages, Darkfall Solus. You know, it just allows you to live that little bit longer, especially when you're getting smashed and you're in panic mode. You know, having 5 points in this gives you that extra cushion because of that 30% damage reduction, which is actually better than the Hunter subclass, which only gave you 15% damage reduction. However, do keep in mind that the Hunter's 15% is active all the time, but the Welfare Management on the Waker only activates after you drop below 50% HP. And last but not least is the most important skill for the Waker subclass, and that is Resto Friends Rescue over here. You have a chance of recovering HP when your HP drops a certain percentage below maximum. So this ability does have a 30-second cooldown. However, whenever you take 25% or more damage in a single hit, you automatically recover 30% of your HP. So this ability is incredibly useful and incredibly clutch because it's essentially a free 30% maximum HP heal every 30 seconds. So every time you take more than 25% damage, whenever you get hit, it automatically recovers 30% of your maximum HP. So essentially, by having 10 points into Resto Friends Rescue over here, you're going to be saving yourselves a lot of rest assigns because you're going to be constantly healing automatically. So you might not need to use the rest assigns as often as you normally do because you're just naturally recovering HP whenever you take damage. And keep in mind that this 30% of your maximum HP is instant. It instantly heals you 30% of your maximum HP. So if you take less than 30% damage, it just heals back all that damage and it looks like you took no damage from that attack. A lot of people watch my Darkfall Ages as well as my Darkfall Solus guide videos and they're like, Karo, you took no damage from that attack. You took no damage from that laser beam. How is that possible? And it's because of Resto Friends Rescue over here. It did like 20% of my maximum HP or 25% and I recovered 30%. So when you look at my HP bar, even though I did get hit, the moment I got hit, it instantly healed more than the damage that I took. And that's why it looked like I took no damage at all, and this is why I really like the Waker subclass. And last but not least is of course the Slayer subclass. The Slayer subclass is fairly straightforward, it's just all about crits. So critical up over here increases critical rate by 3%. Then you have Gallant Attack critical up, which increases your critical rate when attacking boss enemies by another 2%. So that will give you 5% crit rate right here. And then on top of that, we also have critical hit PP gain, which whenever you crit, you actually recover 2 photon power, but there is a 1 second internal cooldown in this, so just keep that in mind. You know, just because you crit like 7 attacks in a row will not allow you to recover 14 photon power instantly. It's actually only going to recover 2 photon power every second. So there is that internal cooldown, which makes this ability not as awesome as it could have been. Alright, so now that I've covered all 10 classes, which are my favorites? For PSE bursting, it's going to be the Force, because simply the eradication PP gain is just too good to pass up. Being able to recover 5% of your maximum PP every time you kill an enemy is just super good, especially in PSE farming. So Force is my go-to when I'm doing any PSE farming. Now, if I'm doing any difficult content such as Dark Vault's Aegis or Dark Vault Solus, I always rock the Waker. The reason for this is simply because it allows me to play incredibly sloppy. I can make a ton of mistakes, I can go ham, I can just ignore anything about defense and just go damage, and the Waker subclass is going to protect me from 90% of the attacks. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly useful, and with the lucky sign, it basically allows me to spam the living daylights out of healing items as much as I want, and I will almost never run out of healing items. However, if I am speedrunning and if time is of the essence, then Bouncer subclass or Fighter subclass are going to be the ones that I would go. The Bouncer subclass simply because you down the enemies a lot more often and a lot quicker, and on top of that, whenever you break boss parts, you gain increased DPS and you take less damage. This is incredibly powerful. However, let's say that the boss doesn't have any parts to break. Then the Fighter subclass would be the one that I would use because of defeat advantage over here. You gain extra damage whenever you down the enemy, and then the defeat PP recovery. Whenever the enemy is down, you recover photon power a little bit quicker whenever you auto attack, so that is incredibly useful as well. Now as for Lucille exploration, if you do get one of those days where the boss always confuses you, or if you take any damage you get confused or poisoned or whatever, then I will be running the Ranger subclass simply because of bad condition ward as well as bad condition reduction. These don't seem like they're very effective, however in those very niche scenarios they will save your life and they will make your life so much easier, especially if you are planning to spam a lot of Lucille exploration and you know the modifiers just aren't that great. Then Ranger subclass can definitely help with that. However, other than that, all of the other subclasses over here are really up to personal preference. Personally, I think all of the subclasses are viable. It really depends on your personal playstyle. It's just for me personally, you know, I put a lot of emphasis on the Waker as well as the Force. These two are pretty much my go-tos simply because it allows me to play like an absolute monkey and just like mash buttons and face roll over the keyboard, and you basically don't die if you have a Waker subclass. And then with the Force subclass, you know, you never run out of photon power, so you can just sit there and just ground pound as a Slayer or just spam whatever technique or whatever photon arts that you want, and you're never going to run out of photon power. And that is why I personally prefer these two. But at the end of the day, they are all good subclasses. It's really whatever fits your personal playstyle the best. However, if you are running endgame content and you're really struggling to stay alive, I highly recommend Waker subclass to a lot of players, especially when you're still learning a fight, or maybe you're just like me and you just want to play incredibly sloppy and you're on autopilot. Then having the Waker subclass is going to make your life so much easier as it gives you that breathing room to make a lot of mistakes. Special thanks to all the members for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me. Thank you again. But yeah, that's all I wanted to cover in today's video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. If you did, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye.